Hey there, I'm Sean Griffin. This is Morning Cup of Context. Thanks for joining me. I was reading this morning in the scriptures, and I came upon something that I thought was interesting simply because I've heard so many people talk about this idea about how they honor the Sabbath and what they can and cannot do on the Sabbath. And one of those things that people use multiple scriptures to try to support this idea that you just can't cook anything on the Sabbath. And so I wanted to look at that real quick and let's see if there's any context around those ideas that might either support that or give us a different idea. Exodus 16 verses 19 through 21, Moses said to them, "Let no man leave any of it until morning." But they did not listen to Moses and left some part of it until morning. And it bred worms and became foul. Moses was angry with them. They gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat. But when the sun grew hot, it would melt. Now what is the it that we're talking about in this verse? What's the context of this passage? Well, it's the manna, right? The manna that was fallen from heaven. The first time it happened, some of them gathered and too much, and they didn't cook it all, and so that the next morning it was rotten, right, and it was going bad. So the following verses after that, 22 through 24, says, "Now on the sixth day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, 'This is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning.' They put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it." Now, yes, that's right, because when you cook something, it doesn't have time to spoil. And so they'd already made food out of the bread, and whether through baking or broiling, I'm not exactly sure what you boil with bread, but so they had already made their preparations with the manna, because the manna is the entire context. The manna and the quail are the two big themes of context in the entire chapter of Exodus 16. So within the surrounding context of this manna that was going bad, Moses said, okay, well, so that doesn't happen anymore. Bake what you're going to bake, boil what you're going to boil on Friday while using the manna, right? And then that way you don't have the chance of it going bad on Saturday. Now, people also use that verse with this next one I'm about to read, all right, to suggest that someone shouldn't be able to cook at all on the Saturday, on the Sabbath. So let's look at it again. It's Exodus 35, verses 2 through 3. It says, "For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day you shall have a holy day, a Sabbath of complete rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death." Sounds severe. "You shall not kindle a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day." Okay, so they immediately would say this passage with "do not do any work," and "you shall not kindle a fire." This is the only place in Scripture it says "do not kindle a fire on the Sabbath." And it uses in Exodus 35, this two little phrases here, these two verses, is the only context of this idea. It goes on to speak about other things in verse 4 on down, right? So this is where the context of this idea stops. So let's look at the word used for work in verse 2, right? And Strong's Concordance uses that word to mean for business, cattle, industriousness, occupation, officer, manner of workman. It's for properly for deputyship, generally employment. Okay, abstractly also property, business, cattle, industry, occupation, officer thing, workmanship. Okay, so the idea here is talking about doing work as in your actual job, something that brings you your income, your monetary labor. And there's nothing in this connotation of this word work that has anything to do with preparing a meal. Okay, so let's even go back to Exodus 12, right? Before Exodus 16 and before Exodus 35, and let's see if we can ever cook food on a Sabbath, okay? So Exodus 12, verses 15 through 17, it says, "In 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. But on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day until the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall have a holy assembly, and another holy assembly on the 7th day. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person. That alone may be prepared by you. You shall also observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance." So this is when the introduction of the feast of unleavened bread, okay, and I highlighted here, "except what must be eaten by every person, that alone may be prepared by you." So right above it says you shall do no work on this day except what is to be eaten, right? Except what work it takes to make the meal. Okay, so this is the first and the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread are called high Sabbaths. or high holy days. All right, so these were not just even supposedly these were have more importance in as far as making sure you were making this day holy to the Lord. This had more attention, so to speak, paid to it in reverence because it was a feast that happened for 1 week out of the year, and they called them high Sabbaths. Okay, and so in addition, just a normal weekly Sabbath. So what we're looking at is that you're not supposed to do any work except what is work for to be making for the meal. All right, so that's the only mention, right? Let's see, Jubilees chapter 2, verse 9. I think we find some additional confirmation of this idea. It says, "Declare and say to the children of Israel the law of this day, both that they should keep Sabbath thereon, and that they should not forsake it in the error of their hearts, and that is not lawful to do any work thereon which is unseemly, to do thereon their own pleasure, that they should not prepare thereon anything to be eaten or drunk, and that is not lawful to draw water, or bring in or take out thereon through their gates any burden, which they had not prepared for themselves on the sixth day in their dwelling." All right, wow. So it looks like here, like it's saying, wait a minute, I can't make anything to eat or drink on the Sabbath? Well, then how do we reconcile that with an actual holiday, a festival day, a week-long festival day with 2 holy Sabbaths in which there's feasts that are had, that you're supposed to make meals? So is Jubilee in contradiction to Exodus 12? So I don't think so, right? Because what is happening here, and I'm going to show you another verse from Jubilees that expounds even further on this idea. But what is happening here is it's talking about preparing the food. So if you look up and it says, that is not lawful to do any work thereon which is unseemly, to do thereon your own pleasure, that they should not prepare thereon anything to be eaten or drunk, and that is not lawful, and that it is not lawful to draw water, or to bring in or take therein through your gates any burden. So the idea is that you have to prepare, right? You have to prepare your food that you want to cook on the Sabbath. You either buy it from the market, you bring it in, you go and hunt it, you prepare it, you bring it in through the gates, you bring it in from your house, you go and draw the water from the well to be prepared, so you don't have to go, because that was labor, right? To go out and gather the food, buy the food, or gather the water to drink, or the wine or whatnot. That was considered labor. So you're supposed to already have it in your house, so that when the Sabbath was happening, you could just cook it that day. You didn't have to actually go out and round it up. So we get confirmation of that, okay? And Jubilees chapter 50, and there's 2 places in this chapter, and it's verses 9 and 10 that actually tell us that it is okay to make a meal. Okay, just like Exodus 12. You shall know, Jubilees chapter 50, verse 9. You shall do no work whatever on the Sabbath day, except for, and I highlighted the except for, right? Just so we don't miss it. Except for what you have prepared for yourselves on the 6th day, so as to eat and drink and rest. Now, some people might look at this and go, no, wait, see, it just says you can't do any work except because you've prepared it on the 6th day. Well, you've prepared the provisions, right? So there's no reason to even mention the word work and the term except for, right, or save for, except for the work that you would do so as to eat and drink from your preparations from the day before. Okay? And you can keep Sabbath from all work on that day, and to bless the Lord your God, who has given you a day of festival and a holy day. And the day of the holy kingdom for all Israel is this day among their days forever. For great is the honor which the Lord has given to Israel, that they should eat and drink and be satisfied on this festival day, and rest thereon from all labor which belongs to the labor of the children of man, except for burning frankincense and bringing oblations and sacrifices before the Lord for days and for Sabbaths. Okay, so we already know that the priests were already doing their job on the Sabbath, receiving the sacrifices and the oblations that were brought forward. Remember, Exodus 35 was people take that out of context to say you can't even light a fire, so therefore you can't use your oven to cook anything. But that was specifically talking in the context of occupational work, right? Something that but here you can light a fire to burn frankincense, or to bring your oblations and sacrifices, which many of them were burnt offerings, which required lighting a fire, kindling a fire. And now I know many people say, well, you should not kindle a fire in your house, right? Well, that's what I'm saying. Where are you going to burn frankincense? You can burn it in your house. But at the same time, it already told us up above, and in Exodus 12, we're going to be making meals on a Sabbath day. Okay, so the whole context of this idea, the first one that we had to dispel is Exodus 16, right? Talking about baking bull on the 6th day was specifically referenced to the manna, right? And since we're not using manna, right, we don't have to worry about it spoiling. There's a different concept there, okay? So it's not talking about the manna, and I know people wanted to say you can carry it over, but then you'd still have to reconcile it with Exodus 12, which means what are you doing on that high holy day and the feast of unleavened bread when you're instructed to make a meal? Okay, so it's a celebratory day where you actually feast with other people. This is why it's called a feast day. You're actually making a meal, right? So this idea here is that there's two except fors, all right? The first part of verse 9 says, "You shall do no work whatever on the Sabbath day except for which you've prepared for yourself on the sixth day, so as to eat," right? To eat, to drink, and to rest, right? So it's just an amazing little concept here that over time, there is a extra rules that have been laid down from a very outspoken religious source of Judaism. And for a couple thousands of years, they've been taking these instructions from the Torah and from the writings of the Hebrews, and they've been making unique applications of those instructions, many times outside of the context of those instructions. And I would strongly suggest that this is one of them. Okay, to the point where you say, well, see, look, Exodus 35, you can't even light a fire, right? Well, that means you can't. Well, but let's look at the context of that word that was used, the malakah. It was talking about the kind of work that you do for your business that brings you income. It wasn't talking about just your daily life and making food for you and your family. Okay, so this whole idea is that, unfortunately, we have these ideas that have been taken from a system, a religious system that Jesus called burdensome, that these were extra commandments of men that were given on top of the instructions in the Torah, and that they were burdensome. Okay, so this idea that, or the thought that you can't make any food for yourself on the Sabbath is not in Scripture. In fact, there's feast days where we are to make food for ourselves. So is Father contradicting himself? We know that's not true. So we have affirmation from Exodus 12, Jubilees 2, and Jubilees 50 that explain to us that you don't want to go out and that you can do work. Just the only work is you take your preparations from the day before and you can make your food and drink with it. So just to fully explain, there's two more verses in Jubilees, chapter 50, verse 11 and 12. It says, "This work alone should be done on the Sabbath days in the sanctuary of the Lord your God, that they may atone for Israel with sacrifice continually from day to day for a memorial, well-pleasing before the Lord, and that he may receive them always from day to day according as thou hast been commanded. And every man who does not work thereon, or goes on a journey, or tills his farm, whether in his house or any other place, whoever lights a fire, or rides on any beast, or travels by ship on the sea, whoever strikes or kills anything, or slaughters a beast or a bird, or whoever catches an animal or a bird or a fish, or whoever fasts or makes war on the Sabbaths." Okay, so these are things. This is explicitly listing off things do not do. Now, look, most of them are related to work. Some of them are related to hunting. Okay, some of them providing food for yourself, and that's what it's talking about. And now we already know the context when it talks about whoever lights a fire. It's talking about in the occupation of that you would need to light your fire. If you're a potter and you need to bake clay, you're gonna have to light a fire. If you're a goldsmith, you need to, get your cauldron going so you can melt some gold and fashion it onto something. That you have to light a fire. So this whole idea is that it's talking about, not traveling by ship on a sea, not going on a journey, not tilling your farm, whether yours or your neighbor's, not striking anything or killing anything, which means you're going out to hunt, just like it expounds, or slaughters a beast or a bird, right? So that's your preparation day. The sixth day, or any day of the week, they may have gone out and hunted. But as far as slaughtering something to prepare that meat, right, to properly clean it and prepare the meat that can be cooked and eaten, that would have taken place on the sixth day. To go to the well and draw your water out, to have it ready for the weekend, that would have been take place on the sixth day. And then from those preparations, you can then make your meal like normal life, and then have your drink, and then sleep and rest. That was the whole point. It was so that you wouldn't have to do all these things that were a burden, right? Now it's kind of different for us these days. We just go to the market, right? Pick up, some steaks and some vegetables or whatever. But back then it was not like that at all. It was a lot of work. So this whole idea is that that's why traditionally Friday is referred to as preparation day. That's when you got all your food ready. You gathered the food into your house, but you didn't have to always cook everything. Okay, so that's the next day you would actually have cooked your meal like normal. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to show that. And there's something else also in here I think is interesting in verse 12 where it says, "Whoever fasts," that you're actually not supposed to fast on a Sabbath, which I think is pretty interesting. So it does want you to eat, obviously, right? But it's just explained, we already know from Exodus 12 that you can eat on a feast day, and that you have to make a meal on the feast day, not before. And so that's what it's also saying in verses 9 and 12, and also Jubilees chapter 2, 29. So I just want to encourage you guys with that, because some people they're looking to, they're looking deeper. They're looking for something more. They want to see the instructions of God that are applicable for their life. They want to see the reality of that, but they don't want they unfortunately sometimes run into confusion with what has been carried over from Judaism, which, in all honesty, guys, they may hold up the scriptures as what they claim to be their guidebook, but they follow a different book called the Talmud, and all the opinions or commentaries that they have placed on the instructions of the law in the Old Testament over time. And so that's what Judaism is notorious for doing that. So we have to be very careful to parcel out what the scriptures actually say and look at the words as opposed to what people have said they say, right? So that we're not confused and we're not stepping into traditions that are burdensome for us. Because God's law is freedom, right? God's law is not a burden. His burden is light. And so I just want to encourage everyone with that. I hope it helped. If you like videos or like this, just like, share, and subscribe. Help me get the word out. You also go to my YouTube channel and tap the bell for new video notifications. Really appreciate everybody. And you're welcome to put in the comments if you have anything that you would like to see a contextual teaching on. And that way we can look at it and maybe make a video on that topic matter. So I appreciate everyone. And just remember, context creates comprehension. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.